Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
It's been branded Project Fear by opponents, and in a moment I'll be talking to one of the Remain campaign's chief protagonists. First, here's a reminder of how they've been making their case over the past week.
Tell us what the model is that they believe the European Union would negotiate with Britain. Remember, this is going to be a divorce if we decide to leave, and as with any divorce, it's likely to get messy.
In many ways, I'm a Eurosceptic, absolutely, and I'm still a Brussels basher in many ways, and will always remain so.
I think the answer to the concerns that people have, and these concerns, of course, are not completely absent in Scotland, isn't to clamp down on free movement.
If we leave, the people who are advising us to leave, they cannot at the moment answer the question about what arrangements they will put in place. And I think that is of concern. So Project Fact is about saying stay and you know what we get.
And I'm joined now by Nick Herbert. He's leading the Conservatives in campaign. Welcome to the programme. Let's go through a number of things your side has been saying. First of all, let's take the Calais camp. The Prime Minister's office has said that if we leave the EU, the Calais camp of migrants would move to Kent. But the migrants are in the Calais camp because they want to get to Britain. If they made it to Britain, why would they create a new camp here?
Well, I think the point is, and this has been endorsed by leading French politicians now, that there would be little French interest in maintaining the arrangements that we have of the juxtaposed border controls, that people are stopped on the French side.
But why would that result in a camp in this side?
Well, what it will result in is people coming over to this side and we having to deal with them rather than the French, which means that they could claim asylum in this country. And what was interesting about this claim, which I think is a matter of common sense, that is how the French would respond if we were outside of the EU and they no longer have the same set of incentives to cooperate, is that it was dismissed as scaremongering, and yet now we have the most senior politicians in France confirming that this would probably be the case. So this isn't scaremongering at all.
The French in a minute, but what I'm working is, why would there be, you would move the camp overnight to the south of England. Explain to me why they would form a camp if they've made it to Britain.
Well, the point is that we would have to deal with them on the British side, and they could claim asylum. That would require us to send them back. And one of the things that we have in this debate, I think, is that we need to do is to remind ourselves that we have border controls in Britain. We are not part of the passport-free area, the Schengen Agreement in the rest of Europe, and we can and do check EU citizens when they come in. We indeed turn them away. Thousands of EU citizens are turned away from our borders, and it is to our advantage that these controls that prevent people coming in are on the French side.
But let's assume that the French do what you're claiming that they do. I'll come on to whether they will in a moment, but let's assume it. If they come here, if they make it here, either they'll apply for asylum, in which case they'll go to official reception centres till that's sorted out, or they'll disappear into the labour market. Neither involves the creation of a camp in the south of England. Can we just be clear on that?
Well, I don't know what was meant by camp. What I do know is that we at the moment have what I do know is that at the moment we have arrangements where people can be stopped on the French side. The French would have little incentive to keep that if we were to walk out of the EU. That has been made clear at the highest level amongst French politicians, and yet it was initially dismissed on this side by Brexit campaigners as scaremongering. And I think it's a very good example of an issue that we will have to deal with if we leave.
Well, you keep on mentioning these French politicians. Only one senior French politician has said this in the government. That's the economics minister. Would you like to tell our viewers what the French interior minister has said, who's responsible for French immigration policy?
Well, right up to President Hollande last week.
He didn't say anything about that.
President Hollande and his ministers have made clear that this is and would be on the agenda. The local mayor has made this clear.
The mayor doesn't run
There is a
France.
raft of French politicians who have made this clear.
Other than
And
Mr. Macron, name one.
Common sense would tell us that if there is an arrangement that at the moment has been entered into, yes, separately to the EU arrangement, but because it is a part of the cooperation and partnership that we have with the French, that they would no longer have that same arrangement if we were out of the EU.
Well, let me tell you what the French Interior Minister, Bernard Cazeneuve, he's in charge of France's immigration policy. He says ending the treaties which govern the Calais camp would, quote, not be a responsible solution. We won't do it. We'd like to go on building a good immigration policy with the UK, especially at Calais. Why would you contradict the immigration minister?
Well, but other French ministers have said different things.
One.
Well, only a very senior French minister, and it was implicitly confirmed by President Hollande.
Let's just look at what governs the Calais camp. The 1991 Sanguet Protocol governs the border controls to the tunnel. The 2003 Latuki Treaty governs border controls on ferries. Both are Anglo-French bilateral treaties. Either side could withdraw, whether we are in or out of the EU. So why is our EU membership the critical factor?
Yeah, no, I'd already made that point to you, that this is a separate issue legally to our EU membership. But the question is, what incentive would the French have to continue with those arrangements if we were outside of the EU? And it is, as I say, senior French politicians themselves and local French politicians who are raising these questions. What I think this is a reminder of is the fact that
these are not EU treaties, that they are Anglo-French treaties.
No, I've already said that.
The French could stop them tomorrow whether we are in or out.
Yeah, I've accepted that. I said that before you did, that it is legally a separate matter, but politically, I think there is little doubt that the French would not have the same set of incentives to stand by this issue. That was made clear at the highest level last year. And all of this is a reminder that actually Britain is in a different position than the rest of our EU partners. We aren't in these Schengen arrangements. We do have border controls. It's in our interest that some of those border controls operate on the other side of the Channel Tunnel, and in our interest that we continue to remain outside of the Schengen area. Indeed, it's one of the things that gives Britain the best of both worlds, where we're able to access the market, but we're outside of the passportless free area.
The Sanguet Protocol, which governs the tunnel, is actually a protocol to the Treaty of Canterbury, which sets up the tunnel. There's no way you can change that protocol without reneging on the treaty. It's now an integral part of it. Why would and to close down the existing situation would effectively close the tunnel. The French government owns 55% of the operations of the tunnel. Why would they do that in or out of the EU?
Then ask the French politicians who have been
you've
suggesting.
Only named one so far.
Well, you confirmed that it was the senior French minister
who said
this. It was implicitly
That's all.
confirmed by the president. It's been said by local politicians.
He hopes to be running for president next year. None of
this has come out of thin air, Andrew. It has come because it would very obviously be one of the ways in which we would lose out potentially from withdrawing from the EU, and that is because the same set of arrangements that mean that we cooperate with our partners would no longer exist.
Let's move on to the benefits of membership. Your side of the campaign has said that we benefit £3,000 per household has accumulated over our time in the EU. Do you stand by that figure?
Well, it was a CBI figure, and it wasn't actually their own calculation. What they did was to look at a range of studies that showed the economic benefits of the single market. They ranged from some saying that there wasn't a benefit to others saying there was a very substantial benefit. They said, and they've updated this research just last month, that the majority of those studies showed that there was a substantial benefit of up to 10% of GDP. They calculated it as a figure of £3,000 per head. It's not a figure that the government has used.
No, but you're using it. Britain is stronger in Europe. You're using it. Do you stand by it?
Yes, that is the CBI's figure.
But do you stand by it?
That is an average figure that it has been used based on the studies that have been done, not the CBI's own studies. What it shows is that there is a net benefit to us being in the single market. The benefits
Let me try one more time.
Better trade.
Do you stand by the £3,000 figure?
Well, it's not a figure that I have used, but it's a perfectly reasonable figure.
Your campaign is, you look down there, Britain is stronger in Europe.
Yeah, it's a perfectly reasonable figure for them to use, because it's based on studies that have been done, which are not their studies. And the majority of those independent studies that have been done show that there is a benefit to being in the single market.
Well, but the CBI says, of its study of 12 research papers, most up, it originally began with 5 research papers, all of which were pro-EU. It's widened that to 12, some of which are more hostile now. But it also says, it concludes, there is, quote, an unavoidable degree of uncertainty. The benefit could be much smaller. Don't you have to caveat that?
Yes, I think that in all of these questions, we have to weigh up the costs and the benefits. And what the CBI study showed was that the majority of the studies, I think it was the 5 out of the 7, showed that there would be a benefit. That benefit could be quite substantial in terms of the increase in our GDP, our domestic product, that has been gained as a result of being in the single market. And what that comes back to is that because the single market gives us easier trade, because it facilitates business, because it benefits the huge number of companies that trade with the European Union, there is a benefit to the whole economy. And the big question is, if we were to leave the European Union, what alternative arrangement would we have? That's the question that the opponents won't answer. They won't say whether we would be in the single market or not. And the risk is that we would lose those benefits. And as a consequence, that there would be an impact on our businesses and therefore on the economic benefit that is coming to this country.
On the research paper, you're quite right, the CBI didn't do its own research. It did a review. Yeah. The latest one was 12 research papers with 14 estimates. Some of the papers had 2. Out of the 14 estimates, it took out 7. It didn't include. It just so happens that the 7 it took out happened to show far fewer benefits. So we're right to be skeptical. The sample in the end is down to a largely pro-EU sample.
I mean, to be fair, I think you need to ask the CBI about its calculation. But what was striking was that the range of benefit in the majority of the studies that they took it down to, of the 7...
Took it down to?
Yeah, was up to 10% of GDP. And most serious economic analysis shows that there has been a benefit to being in the single market to our economy. And that, of course, is exactly why businesses themselves, the majority of members of the British Chambers of Commerce, the majority of members of the Institute for Directors, the FTSE 100 companies that last year, well, a full third of the FTSE 100 companies were saying that it would be damaging to leave the EU, and the other 2/3 certainly weren't saying the opposite.
I want to move on to one final point.